Welcome to the Being Resilient podcast with your host, Stephanie Olson. Hello and welcome to Being Resilient. I am so excited because I am talking to two women today who are absolutely amazing. I've had the chance to get to know them very briefly, and I cannot wait for you to get to know them a little bit more. And I'm going to read their bio here, and then we're just going to get right into it. So Fran Bontempo and Kristin Smedley are resilience experts. Who doesn't love that? TEDx speakers, best-selling authors, media hosts, content creators, and presenters who have been featured on entrepreneur.com, Thrive Global, Medium, and others. Co-founders of Brilliantly Resilient and Pretty Darn Funny. So they're my kind of gals is what they are. But as a young mother, Kristin found herself raising two blind sons. Fran navigated her son's crushing heroin addiction. With few resources, they were determined to survive and thrive. They founded Brilliantly Resilient to teach others to come through challenges, brilliant, not broken, with tools, strategies, and an action plan to reset with resilience. Rise and reveal the brilliance within us all. Well, Fran and Kristin, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast. Welcome.
We are so excited to be here. Thank you, Stephanie. This is so great.
This is just the beginning of a very long friendship. I have a feeling this is not going to end here. So now you do both have incredible stories of resilience and what you have gone through and what you have overcome and probably what you're still overcoming in certain areas. So share your story and I will let you both fight over who goes first. So let you do that. I'm not gonna intervene here. So
us fight, argue.
I'm gonna let Kristin jump in and start here, and then once we get rolling, we bounce pretty well off of each other. So.
Perfect.
Yeah, we're all smiling and laughing, and your listeners there heard the little snippet of the bio, and I wanna caution everybody that as you hear our stories, I want you to realize that although ours are very, they're kind of big and not many people have had to deal with the stuff we've had to deal with, but we are living, breathing proof that if we could do it, anybody can do it. Everyone actually has all of this resilience and brilliance in them. It's just a matter of tapping into it. And Fran and I will talk till we're blue in the face about the fact that it's just when we forget that we have it, that it becomes really hard.
That's right.
And let's face it, when we keep getting those sucker punches, it's like, really? I have to practice this again,
Yes.
But at any rate, and probably a lot of your listeners are like I always was. I was a list maker and a list checker offer. I would set my goals and work hard and do all the things and was always told that I was talented and gifted. So I figured, you do things right and everything goes your way and then you celebrate, right?
Right.
And I maybe, I would say I'm a recovering control freak. My kids would remove the word recovering. I still am. But all of that being said, I smile now and I smiled my whole life. I was always Captain Optimism and happy-go-lucky. And I achieved every dream I had. The final one, I wanted to be a teacher since I was 5. I wanted the marriage, the big house, the SUV. I had it all. And the final dream that I wanted was to be a mom. And I don't know if you guys are like me, but when I finally got pregnant and my belly was growing, you start out like you find out you're pregnant, and you're like, oh, I just want a healthy baby. And then by like month 8, I'm like, is he gonna be the Phillies pitcher or the Eagles quarterback? Like I'm envisioning valedictorian, all the big things, right? And then he's born, and I was like, I had every dream I ever wanted, and my biggest one was to be a mom, and it came true. And I thought, how happy can a person be? Yeah. And then at 4 months old, I heard that sentence, "Your son is blind," and I was like, I would like to just say that I was sad and cried a little. I was I was furious. I was in a spin. I actually literally crashed to the ground because the weight of it was completely out of my control. There was nothing in that. Let me tell you something. I read What to Expect When You're Expecting like it was my job, you know? And then I'm like, who wrote this thing that there's not one sentence in there about if it goes awry and you hear blindness, you know? So, you know, for me, it was, and I've come a long way. My oldest son is now 21, and he's doing very well. But, however, in that moment, I said to the doctor, will he play baseball? Who the hell says that?
Wow.
Because I was so clutching onto the life I had planned for him.
Yeah, the dream.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll pause there and let Mary Fran tell her story, but I was a complete and utter mess.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Mary Fran.
So my story is, you know, I always refer to myself as Marsha Brady because that's who I was growing up. You know, I never did anything wrong. I never smoked. I never drank. I never did anything. I mean, I was an honor student. I ended up getting a scholarship to college, all that stuff. I was the youth minister at our parish. I sang at church on Sundays, you know, the whole 9 yards. So when I had kids, I got a little bit further in my journey than Kristin before everything went to, you know what, in a handbasket. It just crashed and burned. But for me, it was Mother's Day of 2010. And that was the day that I found out that my son was a heroin addict. He had overdosed on a pain medication because he could not get his hands on heroin that day. So I'll just back up just a tiny bit and say he was by no means was he like a perfect kid one day and a heroin addict the next day. But what I've come to realize since that time and having gone through all that is the two closest, I will call them companions because they are not friends, of the train that is barreling towards you. The two closest companions are distraction and denial.
Yeah.
And I was the queen of distraction and denial. I mean, I knew that under the surface, things were a roiling mess, but I don't know whether it was not having a big part of it was having no frame of reference. I never did anything wrong. I didn't have the slightest idea of how the mind of my son worked. So getting back to Mother's Day of 2010, he overdosed. When I went out of the room. I was at my mother's house with him and my family. And I left the room for a moment and came back to hearing a lot of commotion, and he was shaking uncontrollably on the couch. So we called the paramedics, and when they came in, they kept asking him, "What did you take?" And that I didn't understand the question. I just thought he was having some kind of a seizure, whatever. In my distraction and denial mind, in my real mind, that place where you really know what's going on, you just can't admit it, I thought, oh, here we go. This is the moment. So we got him to the hospital, and the doctor said to us, this is what he is. He's an addict. But if what he took had a high acetaminophen content, and they said, if we cannot reverse the effects of this, he will need a liver transplant if he lives. Wow. So, you know, when your kids are little, you get macaroni necklaces and little picture frames and all. And I got an addict, a heroin addict. So I will condense the whole story and say that many years of suffering and all of that, we ended up finally coming out of this. And when Kristin and I met, that was where we realized that even though we had very different experiences, not having gone through them at the same time, we didn't know each other at the time, but we realized in talking to each other and getting to know each other that we shared very similar processes to get through our train wrecks and sucker punches. And that is where Brilliantly Resilient was born.
That is great. So talk about what were those processes that you went through to get from train wreck to, okay, because you really, there's a point where you go from train wreck to, okay, so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna die today at some point, I think. Mm-hmm. So tell me how you went through that.
Well, we've got it's basically three pieces to this that like Mary Fran said, it was so bizarre. We had never known each other when we went through this stuff and then met, and we realized that it's the reset, the rise, and then where we take resilience to a different level than most people is when you look at the brilliance that was within you that you utilize to go to some other trajectory. That's where it's like, I won't say that I welcome the sucker punches now, because it's still like, really, we're still rehearsing the reset, rise, and reveal. Like, come on. But it makes you approach it with the growth mindset that, okay, I'm going to grow through this, not go through this. So to answer your question, well, you can focus on the reset for a minute, because I think that's where a lot of people are now and are continuously trying to practice this. God, like, blind kid, no. And I should also reveal that my second son was born blind, also the exact same thing 3 years later. And I'm like, no, but the biggest piece in our three piece of the reset is the controllables. Like, what is really in your control? And I have to be honest that, for 3.5 years, Michael's first 3.5 years of his life, every single night I prayed blindness away. And every single morning I was furious all over again when I would go into his crib and he was still blind. And if I would have understood the what's in my control and out of my control sooner, I would have saved myself some hair, some wrinkles, and had a lot more joy. But that piece of looking at it, of what is really in your control, is one of the first steps.
Yeah. And that's hard.
It's very hard. It's very hard. But I would say this, and this was the other thing that Kristin and I realized, and I'll say that we realized this in retrospect. We didn't realize any of this while we were going through it. But now that we know it, we want other people to not take as long as we did to get through all this stuff.
Share the wisdom and the benefit. Yes.
Exactly. If your pain is to be worth anything, it has to mean something. And that's what we decided. But what we also realized was that when we start this process, you have to sit with what you're feeling. You have to acknowledge it. But you also make a decision. And that decision is, are you just visiting that place of challenge and pain, or are you going to live there? Right. Are you going to unpack your bags and just stay there forever? And I mean, obviously the answer is don't live there. But that doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge it. That doesn't mean you don't respect it. That doesn't mean you don't feel the pain. It's just that you make the decision that you are not going to live in that victim, woe is me set for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. Right. Which is a very comfortable place to live.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah. You get to, and here's the other thing, people will, they'll stroke you on the head and oh, poor you. And that's fine. Everybody needs a little TLC at the beginning, but that is a slippery slope. Yes. If you fall into that mindset, you very quickly become, it's like cement shoes. Right. You're stuck. You don't get to move. That's so there are a couple of other pieces, I think, of the reset in terms of values and perspective. And I'll let Kristin jump in and talk about those quickly, and we'll move on to the rise.
Yeah. So the biggest piece that I realized and I actually did my TEDx talk on this, that I was able to start my reset in a whole new way was how I was looking at blindness. My perception of blindness, and I do give myself a lot of grace now, but it was hard for me to talk about this, especially in the blind community. I had never met a blind person until I met my son.
Wow.
So my perception of blindness was what TV showed me and what probably everyone listening thinks.
Sure.
Devastation, hardship, lonely, dark. That's what I was looking at this as. Right. And that's what I was creating. That was my outcome. For 3.5 years, I was incessantly sad. However, my Michael, it was I won't go through the entire story, but there was, when I was pregnant with my second son, who I was back to being optimistic. There's no way that this will happen a second time and whatever. And then I had a come to Jesus moment where I was like, oh my God, there's a 25% chance this could happen a second time.
Wow.
And I was at my lowest that I had ever been in that 3-year journey. And it was my Michael at 3.5 years old that popped into my bedroom, because Michael never just walks or does anything other than pop, jump, skip, dance. And he popped in, and his famous line was, "Mommy, isn't this the best day ever?"
Oh.
And I thought, I dreamt my whole life to be a mom. And that was the number one job that I was going to rock in this world, and knew that that was my number one purpose. And I was the crummiest mom for 3.5 years, because blindness wasn't in his way. It was me, his mom, that was in his way, because I wasn't getting him the pre-Braille instruction. I was a teacher, wasn't getting him Braille, because Braille said to me, blindness, devastation. I wasn't getting him the mobility instruction to go through this world independently and not have to hold my hand all the time. So that moment, as hard as it was to realize that I was the worst at my job that anyone could ever be, I thought, oh my God, he's not seeing this as a problem, so I can't see it as a problem anymore. All it really was a mere inconvenience sometimes for him.
Right.
And as soon as I looked at it that way, that blindness is not a barrier, our attitude about it is, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, people were dropping into my journey. It's like Mary Fran. They were there all the time. I was choosing to look at that door and bang on the door of sighted valedictorian.
Right.
As opposed to, hey, he's going to do some things a little different. And boy, are you going to learn a lot as a mom. And then once I was looking at it with the right eyes, oh my gosh, so much of that sadness and devastation fell away.
Wow. And I was going to ask you, did you have a support system around you during that time?
I didn't. I didn't until there was a, I don't know if anyone can remember back in those days, 21 years ago, there was no Facebook.
What?
There was no Google. There was no meetups. There was there was like play groups, but they were all sighted. Like nobody was walking my walk.
Right.
There was one conference I had been to, and I did make a decision in that conference after hearing a mom and son argue about skateboarding. And then I figured out that he was totally blind. And I thought that was the most hilarious, craziest conversation. And Mary Fran's going to talk about the part where you make a decision. And I made a decision that I didn't know how I was going to get there, but I wanted to argue with my son about skateboarding and not the other wackadoodle that was in the room screaming at her mom that she gave her the wrong cookies. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but it was very hard to answer your question. It was very hard to find people that were my people back then. Now, I don't want to say there's no excuse, but now you guys, it's a lot easier.
It's true.
To seek out some people that are people.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So the one last piece of the reset bit that we wanted to talk about is, when you come up against these crises and these challenges and all, it really takes so much of you away of who you thought you were. It takes away your identity. It takes away where you thought you were. It takes away, where you thought you were going. It's a sucker punch to all of your preconceived notions of who you are. But the beauty of that, and Kristin and I found this, is that it allows you to get back to your core basic values. What is really, really important to you that are non-negotiables? Right. What are those things that you refuse to compromise on? And once you really take a look at that, life is so fast for all of us. And when you come up against something like this, you literally hit a brick wall, like everything stops. Right. So use that time to figure out just the pieces that you want to rebuild and let everything else go, because it does anyway. It falls away because it's not important anymore. So, I laugh kind of when people say, oh, we want to get back to normal with the pandemic. I don't.
New normal.
I don't want to get back to normal. That was too chaotic. Like I know the pieces that are important to me now. That's what I want to take going forward. So those are the pieces for the reset. And the rise piece, the second piece of it, actually references what you were talking about building a tribe and a support system.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of who is it that Ralph Waldo Emerson has a quote that I'm going to completely butcher, but it's about building, it references building a tribe. And he says that the thing that we want most is for people to understand and have been there and that we can relate to. It's a human need,
Right.
you know, to be able to keep moving forward. I mean, it's the worst thing when you feel like you are all by yourself.
Yeah.
No one's ever done this. And trust me, yes, they have. Look, when I went through my divorce, I'm like, well, I know that 50% of America is divorced, but not like mine, you know, like,
right.
like,
Exactly.
guess what? Yes, other people have been there, you know, and they have, and it's like, you know, even for my blind sons, I watched them one time. I mean, I'm like party central at my house. I always have everybody over so that they're comfortable coming to our house. And when the kids were little, I watched my boys meet when they first started meeting other blind kids, not just blind kids, blind athletes like they were, and blind, God help me, my family never shuts up. They're all talkers around here, you know, talkative, outgoing, athletic, blind kids. I actually said to my Michael one time, I go, you know, you got a really good life here and I make things really fun, but I watch you when I drop you off there and it's a whole different kind of happy.
Wow.
Like, shoulders would relax. And he's like, Mom, I just get it. Like, we don't have to worry about you people, which he always says about the sighted people, right? Like making you feel better.
Yes.
And interpreting what the heck you're saying about go put it over there. And I don't know where you're saying. He's like, there is none of that. Like, my people just understand me.
That's amazing.
And yes, Michael has been with, my kids have been in public school and all of that. They have all different tribes. But watching them with the people that really, they get it and they're supportive, you know, and like I said, we have all these different, our family and whatnot. It just makes a huge difference to have other people do. And tribe doesn't have to be 57 people.
No,
it could be 2.
Absolutely.
You know? I mean, we were a tribe of 2, me and Mary Fran, when the pandemic hit and we had to relaunch and pivot and change. Oh my God. We were mad for a whole week. We were really mad.
That our whole did a lot of sulking for 1 week.
Yeah.
You know?
A lot of us did that.
But then we built a tribe on Facebook of now almost 1,000 people. Like, it just makes a difference.
That's great. That is amazing. And I think that with both of your stories, and I kind of want to hear the aftermath, so to speak, and how you not only, you know, walked through that, but how you became somebody who was thriving through that. And I think it's so difficult when you say that you think you're the only one who's experiencing this. And the reality is we've all gone through something that we have to learn how to pick ourselves up and walk through it. And it's going to be different for every single one of us. And in your situations, I think what is so telling is that neither one of you had experience with what your kids experienced. And so that makes it that much more challenging.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It absolutely does. And to your point, that's why we tell people you have to sit with your individual crisis, challenge, whatever it is, and feel what it means to you, because that is the part that is unique to you. However, these other pieces are universal. These other pieces of check your perspective, check your values, control the controllables. Those pieces can apply to any crisis, any challenge, as does the part where you then, this rise part. And one of the things that Kristin and I learned about was this concept of post-traumatic growth, which is an actual scientific thing. Who knew? We were science. Like, we're so impressed that we learned this sciencey term. But what it means is that you come through these challenges with a different mindset, with an awareness, more of an awareness of what your natural skills and talents are. Like Kristin and I both, like she said, we're both teachers by education and profession. We are great researchers. We are great communicators. Like, these are things that are part of our unique skill set and brilliance. And when times got tough, that's where we went. We went to our sweet spots. And this is one of the things that we try to tell people about your brilliance. It's not hard for you. Like, we think that our brilliance is this thing that it's going to require so much blood, sweat, and tears. And it's the complete opposite of that.
Yeah.
We think in this country that you have to work for something to be worthwhile. That is not true. Where
It's
your brilliance.
grind. We have to always grind. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, no, the brilliance is so
we
it's like
are.
almost ridiculous, and it's so super simple.
Right.
Yeah.
And actually, even to back up, to put this in a point of reference, you know, Mary Fran and I both, when we talk about this, going back to your core values, both of us, without realizing it, you probably, if you're really keen paying attention, then you heard both of us that one of our core, absolute core values is being a mom of impact. You know, and a mom is going to raise kids to thrive. And that was the first, I believe that that's the first core value that each of us tapped into. Like, wait a minute, these kids are depending on me, right? So, you know, starting from there, then going through this process, then realizing all these other transferable skills from everything that we've done before, bringing it into that crisis to say, how am I going to, you know, as you asked, Stephanie, go from this to thriving? That's where it began. And then to be able to take, you know, another one of my core values, to give it some practicality here, is community building. I was raised in a big family with, my parents were the you know, the youth people at church, and it was always they were always about the community, giving to it, leaning on it, being a part of it. So community building is strong in me. And now, I mean, I run a global community for moms of blind children, so they don't sit and cry for 3 years. It's just, but for me, I mean, every Monday I'll work 15 hours and I'm talking to moms. I just ran a thing this morning. It fuels me, as opposed to dragging me down, because it is part of my brilliance.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of it. When we are impacted by something that could potentially take us out, and we use that to really help other people, it changes everything. It really does.
It does. Yeah. It gives that experience meaning beyond your own personal pain.
Right.
And, you know, at the end of the day, you almost, at least I felt this way, and I know Kristin did too, you almost feel compelled to do something about it, because you don't want anybody else to feel like that. And there's like, it's almost like a calling, like, okay, I gave you this, now what are you going to do with it? You know, this is like whoever your higher power is, it's like the higher power is saying, what are you going to do with this? And that is where you find your brilliance. And Kristin and I both, this is another value we both share, and that is one of service. Value being of service. And when we put ourselves there, when you put yourself in those places where your values are really solid, your brilliance comes out despite you. Yeah. It just comes out, because that's where your heart is. So that's why we tell people, like, this is not hard, but we don't intentionally think about it. And we tend to downplay things that are easy for us without realizing that these are your gifts. I mean, I know I'm dating myself here, but when the East Germans and the Soviets used to put those gymnastic teams together, they didn't pick the kids who were falling all over themselves in kindergarten. They picked the little girls who were doing cartwheels all over so they recognized that that's where the brilliance is. And that's what you should be focusing on. And, you know, with the Rise piece, it's your tribe, it's your transferable skills. How can you take these things that you did so well during your crisis and move them to another area? And it's figuring out what you can actually do, and then coming up with one action step, like one thing. Don't try to solve the whole problem. You can't do it. You just can't.
No, it puts more stress on you too, to try to figure out what this was my issue too for a long time. I would envision the finish line, and then how am I going to get there? Like, you know, blindness, how am I going to get him to college? And then every day I just didn't have the energies. I didn't even know how do you go from crying on your couch with a 3-year-old to someday he has to live on his own? That wasn't the way. I know that, you know, vision boards are important and all of those things, your higher values. But I had to just take one thing at a time. You know, in my divorce, I wanted to eventually be back to smiling and all that. Well, there's a lot of work you got to do in the meantime.
Right.
And even in the lockdown, the pandemic, when we were joking that our whole plan to be on stages all around the world, because that's really what lights us up, and then that got slammed, and then we decided to start our show. There were still there, I can't even tell you how many days that Mary Fran would have to talk me off that ledge of, because now I've got the 3 kids, I've got this crazy ex-husband, and I would go back into that, oh my God, and sulking. And I'm like, I can't take the action step. And then she would say, all right, you got 15 minutes to sob about this, and then I'm calling you back, and then we're going to figure something out. Like, it was like, okay, fine, sit there, feel, but now you got to do one thing at a time. And then it just makes it so much easier. And then you look back after about 10 steps and you're like, oh my God, we've created this community. We've had shows 100 days in a row. But I also want to mention too, in terms of the brilliance, when I watch Mary Fran talking to, if it's one person or 100 people that are somewhere in the addiction journey with their child, it is unbelievable to me to watch how easy it is for her to talk people through stuff, and their faces are like, it's like a religious experience, because it is such her brilliance. And the two of us, like, when we were doing those shows 100 days in a row, my kids are home, her grandkids are like, and all of the world is falling apart. And we've done about 7 years of work in 1 year, but we come out of it every single time. Like, I know she's going to text me as soon as this interview is over, and she'll go, oh my God, wasn't that amazing?
That was awesome. Yes.
It's like serving other people and knowing when you get to have that impact because you went through something so hard that you thought was going to crush you, and maybe it did for a little while, but then you get to use that to impact the world in a better way. There really is nothing like it.
There is nothing like it. That's so true. I want to go back, Mary Fran, to the addiction piece, because I am a recovering alcoholic. And what you said, Kristin, about one day at a time, that is so important, because that is the life of an addict. You've got to take it one day at a time. And I will never forget when I was newly sober, I said to a group of people, well, what's going to happen when I'm in Paris and I can't drink? And they said, when are you going to Paris? I said, well, I'm not. But what happens if I'm in Paris and I can't drink? You're thinking all this, you're projecting into the future, and it's not even happening. And that is really challenging. So I would just love to hear, because that goes for addiction and just about everything. Mm-hmm. But with your son, so you find out that he's an addict, and that journey of recovery is a very long one and a very difficult one. So tell me what that was like, going through that, because I only know it on the side of being the addict. So what is it like as a mom going through that and watching your son go through something like that?
Well, interestingly enough, that's actually another part of the rise. I became what I'd call a 15-minute master. And I actually wrote a book called The 15-Minute Master. Okay. And it came down to this 15 minutes at a time. Not because people would come up to us after they heard a little bit about our story, and they go, oh, you just have to take it one day at a time. And I'd be like, well, you've never lived with an addict, because
because a day is too long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Things change exponentially in minutes. And I will not cast aspersions on you, Stephanie, but as far as my son was concerned, when he got newly sober, he was still crazy. I mean,
I'm still crazy. So no, I get it.
Yeah. I mean, you're not drinking, you're not taking drugs, but there is a whole rebuild that has to take place, and it takes a long time. So I went with this 15-minute mastery principle. Some days, all I did was get through 15 minutes at a time. All I had, that was my goal. I don't have to do anything but survive the next 15 minutes. But then as things started to ease up a little bit, I came up with these 3 questions that I was asking myself in that 15 minutes. And I would take 15 minutes and kind of make a plan. Okay, what can I do? And the emphasis on the word can, not in the land of magical thinking, like, what do I want to do?
Right.
What can I actually do? The second question was, what should I do? Because just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean we should. And then the third question was, what am I going to do? So that like 15-minute master thing, again, became part of the Brilliantly Resilient model, because when you're in that state of crisis, sometimes the best thing you can do is put your head down at the end of the day and go, thank God I made it through this.
Yeah.
You know, and then if you have time to think a little bit ahead, you break it down into those really simple pieces. What can I do? What should I do? What am I going to do? And keep it very basic, because everything will eventually build, but you got to take it in little itty bitty chunks.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And both of you have incredibly successful children right now.
Yeah.
And they made it through. I think, you know, I think about what I've heard, Kristin, your dreams really have been fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I mean, I think those are the things that you can look back at and say, okay, well, this sucked at the time. And now look where we are. And now look at what you're doing with that, which is just amazing.
Yeah, you know, and I think if your listeners are really really getting a little critical thinking here, you might realize that a lot of us with like my kids are 21, 18 and 17, and a lot of our issues with them tend to stem from our dreams and expectations of what we think they should be doing.
Right.
And I always, not that blindness is a blessing, blindness just is what it is, but a blessing that came from blindness was that those dreams were extinguished. And I just had to, I was like, I don't know what you're going to do. This will be fun. Like, let's see. I just get you everything you need. I follow your lead. And that was wonderful for my blind kids, but it was a big lesson for me with my daughter that's sighted, because I still was hanging on to soccer and hanging on to some things. And when I realized and let all of that go, I will say, yeah, they have, like, Michael was the valedictorian, and he is, you know, the President's Award winner at Penn State, and Mitch is following suit, and they've had extreme success, all three of them. But I can tell you, watching them do it on their terms and it's their dreams is 10 times the fun than if it was the stuff I wanted and they did it because I wanted it.
I love that. And I got to tell you, my dad went to Penn State.
So, it's a cult.
We are Penn State.
They're crazy.
I'm not going to speak to that. So yeah, that is really beautiful. And frankly, we all have those expectations in our lives, whether it be for our family members, for our kids, for our work. And a lot of times those dreams have to die in order for the right dreams to actually rise up. So.
Yeah, I agree. You know, a friend of ours, our friend Charlie, who we did a couple of shows with him, because he's a recovering addict and he went blind and all that. He said to me the other day,
yeah, he had a double whammy. Charlie had a double
I guess.
Oh my God, he was like considering suicide. And then to see him now, Jack Canfield of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah.
He's in one of his success principles. He was mentioned twice in success principles because Charlie just turned it around. But with all of these similar, you know, processes. But he said to me the other day, he said, Kristin, I'm going to mess this up. Expectations of others are resentments on layaway.
Oh, wow.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think about those that are listening, like if you were involved in a divorce too, the biggest thing holding me back from taking the one action step was I was so resentful that I had expected, we, you know, made these vows and it was a marriage that needed to end. Let me just say that for my health and the health of my children, it had to end. But I was so holding on to my expectation of a 50th wedding anniversary and all of these things. And the resentment started to build and build. And I was resenting that I was in this divorce stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, snap out of this, you know?
Wow. Yeah. My leadership team, we actually, and I coin it from somebody else on my team, but we call those our practice husbands.
I'm still on mine.
Our practice.
I'm still trying to fix this guy. I'm still working
his
at
husband. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. I'm glad you didn't say a test husband, because I don't like it when I fail tests.
No, just a practice.
It was just practice.
Like a rehearsal.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
So tell me about Brilliantly Resilient and how the two of you connected and built something so incredible through your pain.
Well, we were introduced through a mutual, we call her a frenemy, because sometimes we're happy and we call her a friend, and other times we think, oh my God, and we call her enemy. So she's our frenemy. But we were introduced and we were working in a mastermind together because we were both speakers and writers in our own right. And we were working to promote our businesses and all of that kind of stuff. And just as we got to know each other, we just clicked. There was just something about, and we've said this many times, our shared, not experiences in the specifics and in the details, but our overall general shared experiences of dealing with some really tough stuff. And we would always be the two who were, going off and plotting and planning and all this other stuff. And just the more that we got to know each other, the more we realized that there was something to this process, that it, first of all, that it was a process, and that it was actually teachable. And the idea that we could help other people not wallow in the pit, as Kristin calls it, for years, because that's how long it took us to get out of it, years. The idea that we could help other people very specifically and say, try this, try that, try very specific actual strategies, and not just be, hey, you can do it, cheerleaders, because Kristin knows I don't like that woo-woo stuff. I don't like that. That doesn't work for me. I don't go for the woo-woo. So when we realized that we had actual strategies, and plus, if you haven't been able to tell by now, we both love to talk and talk to people. So we just thought, honestly, it was a let's try it thing. It was a let's see what we can create. And that is another part of the brilliance piece of this. When you realize that you have certain gifts and you have tribe members who align with you and complement your skill sets, don't worry about figuring out every single solitary thing. This is another piece of the brilliance puzzle. Don't be married to outcomes. Just got to put stuff out there. We try it. We see where it goes. And honestly, the universe, this does sound woo-woo, so I'm just contradicting myself, but the universe will make the things happen that are meant to be, that are going to be the most value to people. And I mean, I don't know, Kristin, do you think there was any more like a specific thing other than it was just like a synergy and hey, let's try a bunch of stuff?
Well, I honestly think that both of us have some very strong, similar core values. And that was what I think where we just started veering off from the rest of the group, because as wonderful as all the other women were, we just had this alignment of values that were just similar. But I will also say that both of us came to everything we were doing, and when we came together, especially, we really wanted to be the resource that each of us never had. And with that as our kind of grounding formula, if you will, or foundation, without even having, like, it's not on our website, we don't have it as our mission statement. It's just a thing that is ingrained in each of us. And I think that's why then, like Mary Fran says, then it's when you go about it like that, with a foundation like that, you're not fearless to try everything, but you're not crippled by the fear. And we did put a bunch of stuff out there. I mean, we're now friends with the creator of Pictionary. Like, we had the guts to call him and all these people.
That's fantastic.
I mean, it's been, when Mary Fran said the universe does open the doors, I mean, it has been so serendipitous that here we were planning this massive one thing. The world shuts down. It is a time when everyone needed some kind of hope and resilience skills, and along comes Goofy and Goofier, on a Zoom thing. We're like, we know how to work Zoom, and I'm like, I don't know if my kids are doing laundry or what, but we're having a good time here, And then
your kids are doing laundry. That's awesome. That's all I'm gonna say right there.
It does help too that the things that I hate to do, she loves to do. The things hates to do, I love to do. So that is a big, when you're looking for tribe members, make sure you put some people in there who love to do the stuff you hate.
That's
it really makes it
exactly
a
right.
whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's the truth, but it just started taking off, and there was no fear about, this is how we don't. Here's the other thing too that I will say, we did catch a really big break with the fact that everything was upside down and inside out. So it was the perfect time to try something, because we would go, oh, we don't really know how to do this with Zoom or the internet. People were like, who cares? The whole world sucks, laugh,
Exactly. If you got someone walking behind you in underwear, even better, right? I mean, it's great. Exactly.
Yeah, we didn't even care about the lighting, nothing. We made these crazy banners and stuff, and it just, and then it is very nice to have successes along the way where the universe reminds you that you are on the right path. Because there's been days where we're like, are you freaking kidding me? Are we really like, are we in our own minds, legends? Like, is this really gonna work? And then we put a book together, we put it out there. We're not even together a year, and the thing lands on the top 100 bestseller list. Like,
amazing.
It's like that's when like, okay, keep going. And a lot of our guests that are very successful have said the same thing. They got knocked down, or they were going to quit. They were going to stop. But you go the next day, and then the next big thing happens. Or you get the email that says, you just saved my life for the past couple of weeks. I've been watching you. So
the breakthrough right after the major storm, I think it often comes through.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's been an extraordinary ride. It really does. Like I said, I don't cheer for the setbacks, but it really makes you look at when there is a setback and that you're capable of the comeback. It's a whole different way that you show up, and you just don't show up for yourself. Like, you start showing up for your kids and your family and your parents and your friends. You just show up differently. And then that's when all of the good stuff, you start tapping into it.
Oh, I love it. Ladies, you are absolutely fantastic. I am so excited. I want to do this again for sure. How can people find you?
Everything that you wanted to know about us ever, and probably stuff that you didn't care to know about us, you can find on www.brilliantlyresilient.net. And we've got programs there. We've got all sorts of good pieces and testimonials from people. And our speaker kit is on there if you need a speaker. And there's just a ton of really good information on there, and links to podcasts and our shows on YouTube and all that other kind of stuff.
And I'm laughing because I'm like, and if you check that website out right now, come back in about 2.5 weeks, because Mary Fran keeps writing stuff on it. She keeps changing pictures. I'll get a text at like 10 o'clock at night on a Friday. Hey, Kristin, could you check this picture? Because I'm updating the website. I'm like,
again?
I'm sorry. I'm taken to
starting all of my texts. All my texts with her to her now start with, I'm sorry, but because I'm sitting there, she's having a party or whatever, and I'm sitting there like adding captions and pictures to the website. Oh God. Anyway,
like, I just do a thumbs up now.
Yeah. She doesn't even answer me anymore. She just goes.
It's so funny. But I did want to mention, on the website, and it is, and I love that I go back in it, and Mary Fran's got all this stuff moved around that looks so cool. But if you just sit there and blink 3 times, a thing's going to pop up where you can get on our email newsletter. But it's not really a newsletter. It's every week we will deliver to your inbox what we call the brilliance bit. And it's a piece of brilliance from whomever the guest is on the podcast that week. And they're super, Mary Fran writes these super short little things, and then it's a link to the podcast if you want to listen to it. But so many people have said that's one of their favorite things. Super quick, get you through the week.
That's fantastic. Anything else you want to add before? I just don't want to stop. So anything else you want to add before I let you go?
We just have really enjoyed this. It's been quite a ride, and we really appreciate that you're working in the resilience space too, because this world needs to understand, remember, and be reminded that you have the resilience there. Yeah. It's just tapping into it, and you're creating a tribe and a platform that is so helpful too. So we really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I thank you both. This has been a blast. I want to do it again. And in the meantime, just congratulations on all that you've done. good luck in all that you're going to be doing in the future. God knows what he's doing with you too. So I think you've got it going on. So thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. And I want to thank you listeners for being a part of Being Resilient. We'll see you next time.
See ya.